Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to the premiere stage for our next session, The Power of Digital Partnership in Driving Growth and Innovation, in collaboration with Wales Tech Week partner, Box UK. In this session, Nicki Young, RS Group's President and Group Chief Digital Officer, will first present the upcoming trends that are set to reshape the trajectory of the manufacturing industry. Then Paul Evans, CEO of Box UK, will present further on unlocking manufacturing's exponential growth potential. Nicki has operated in digital and technology roles for over 15 years now and currently serves as the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at RS Group and President of OKdo. Throughout this time, he's notably led the digitalization within RS Group, resulting in a four-fold increase in digital revenue, now exceeding £1.8 billion. He also played a pivotal role in supporting the launch of BT Sport and BT's foray into handset market. May I welcome Nicki first to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Can you hear me, hopefully? Good. Definitely didn't find that bio by myself. We're going to talk to you about ecosystems primarily, so really about how to harvest partnerships in an ecosystem context to create growth and create and unlock new value streams. Well, we're all part of an ecosystem, and the primary ecosystem we're part of is about community. So you're probably wondering why I'm standing here wearing a hoodie, and Paul's hoodie hasn't arrived yet, so there's definitely some logistics challenges that need to be addressed in this digitization journey. Really, it's about recognizing mental health in the community that we're all part of. So last week was World Mental Health Day, and it shouldn't be one day. So I felt it was important that we remind everybody of that message today in this community. 1/3, particularly of men, so there's more than 3 people in this room, will struggle with mental health throughout the period of their life. And really, I want to kind of break the taboo of that and recognize that toughness is about taking the first challenging and most toughest step, which is about connecting with others in that community and sharing your views. So I'd ask you all just to play a role and really champion that agenda if you're listening to this today. So building on communities, why is that important in the journey we're talking about here today? Well, it's really all about people and connecting people through a digital and technology transformation. And what we see is that the landscape is evolving at an unprecedented pace. And I'm sure if you've listened to keynotes today, many can attest to those different dimensions. But I personally believe that we're in a revolutionary state that's more significant than the inception of the internet. And why is that? Well, because actually there's multiple waves of digital transformation taking place simultaneously. If you look at AI, and there's lots of discussions around generative AI, for me, the biggest takeaway is the pace at which that is evolving. From ChatGPT launch in November, in 3.5 to 4 in February, and then to March, really shows the pace of those technologies and the adoption. Similarly, when we think about smart companies and cloud computing, we're seeing the digital landscape broaden much more significantly. When we think about the concept of Internet of Things and connected devices, there's forecast to be another 30 billion devices connected to the internet in the next 7 years alone. And that just shows the proliferation of edge computing, connecting data, and harvesting intelligence. And then we also look at, for me, around the legacy estate versus the new digital world. So whilst organizations have recognized this transformation, many organizations, very similar to RS, have an 80-year heritage, where RS was a primary catalog distributor with no digital presence in 1997. We go to now in 2023, when 64% of our revenues, which equates to 1.8 billion, is transacted digitally. So that requires significant transformation over a prolonged period. But my view is that actually that time horizon of 20 years previously probably looks more like 10, if not 5, as we look forwards. So the pace of change is really revolutionizing the way that businesses operate and go to market. And those who don't adapt end up operating in the same circumstances as many organizations we've seen in the recent past, whether that's Blockbuster, whether that's HMV, whether that's recently Wilco. There's lots of examples where they recognized the need for transformation and change, but actually their culture or technology didn't allow for that adaptability. I think that challenge is still a predicament many organizations are facing today and is still true for RS. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can think about that differently. And Paul's going to talk about examples where we've done things a bit differently. But really this is about recognizing that shift. But in this journey, Blockbuster had the opportunity to acquire Netflix at £50 million and missed that opportunity. So those two aspects for me that they weren't recognizing. One, the future trends that were evolving, they need to be aware of. But secondly, that adaptability. And we're going to try and bring both of those aspects through today in our discussion. What does that mean? That means you need to have a dual mindset. You need to have an understanding that we're actually racing in what looks like a supercar race, but many of us are driving in technology that looks more like the tractor. And suffice to say, we're not going to keep pace if we operate in this fashion. But unfortunately, the same is true again in RS. We can't disregard the technology that's operating our £1.8 billion business, the tractor. Yeah, it takes long and it takes a long time to evolve, but we have to be building the future and thinking about the new. And that doesn't really look like supercharging the tractor, which actually many organizations are spending a lot of energy on. How do they make a faster tractor? And he used the old Henry Ford quote that if he asked customers what they want, they would have said faster horses, or in this case, faster tractors. We don't believe that that is the model that's going to see you through to success. So this is really about how do you build a plan and an approach that takes you from the end state, so from right to left on the current operation, rather than thinking from where you are today and trying to think and iterate forwards. And for us, that concept comes in the format of ecosystems, working with partners that help you transform your operation. So what do we consider when we think about ecosystems? We think about the concept of connecting those who are doing things really proficiently into an adjoined community where we can harvest the best of everybody's capabilities and bring that differentiation into the market. So it's thinking about that world of everything being connected, that 30 billion devices that I referred to. It's about being more reactive to change that we see coming so that we can be adaptable, we can set up the technology. It's about being ready to evolve, but not having to do that necessarily on just your core platform. Thinking about it in a parallel activity on how you build new platforms and new propositions. And this is the journey that we've been on with Box UK for a number of years and had great success that's allowed us to transform our existing business whilst we build capabilities to transform and set ourselves up for long-term success. And in many respects, we're parallel running these activities. So we're, if you like, some cases supercharging the tractor whilst we build the supercar of the future. So I want to really hand over to Paul to bring this to life a little bit in terms of how we've done this in our partnership.
Thank you, Nicki. Can everyone hear me okay? So what have we delivered together? There's a couple of jigsaw pieces on there, and they're deliberately shown as jigsaw pieces because they're independent, but they all connect together. And they all connect together in the ecosystem, but the connected ecosystem also connects back to the legacy or the more traditional parts of the business that Nicki's talked about. So this is about the supercar that we're building, but we're always mindful that it's got to connect back to the tractor in the analogy we're probably overusing now, but we'll continue to use it. So there's a number of things I'm going to unpack. I'll just move on one slide, so there's a couple of numbers there as well. And I'll draw out a couple. Value-added services is probably the first one I want to talk about, because on the journey of partnership that Box went on with RS, this was probably the first one. So RS saw in 2018 an opportunity in the technology hardware space and felt that they weren't able to deliver that through their traditional IT mechanism because they were already working on the main website and goodness knows what else. So there was a saturation in terms of resource. So they came to Box and we worked together and we built a new organization together called OKdo. And OKdo went live from the middle of November when we started talking about it, in the middle of the summer the following 2019, where it fully went live in an e-commerce site about selling technological hardware. That OKdo company is now managing revenues of over £100 million, double-digit profit, and has pivoted away from hardware, still sells hardware, but moved away to providing complementary design services. It's also powering the children of today, the future, through its partnership with BBC and BBC Microbit. It's also creating design services where it uses its single board computing product, ROC, to be able to integrate that into integrated solutions that is powering things like offshore oil and gas in the States, etc., etc. Those value-added services, that last one I'm talking about called knitting, that's generating over £7 million for OKdo alone, and just seen how that business has evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. But that's because it's able to move at pace, not constrained by the necessary technology of yesterday. We got a bit further and we built a subscriptions model. So we figured out these design engineers that are working out about knitting together and kitting, what are they looking for? Well, they're actually looking for somewhere they can go and get design tools and talk to communities. So we created a subscription model that sits in an ecosystem where a design engineer can subscribe and go in. They can use CAD tools and access to other design tools, but they can also engage in a community of like-minded people and say, hey, I'll be a bit technical, geeky here. How do I fit that in there? Or whatever it might be that they talk about in those communities. So subscriptions came along. Again, speed to market. We talked about subscriptions April last year. The MVP, minimum viable product, went live in January of this year. And we're already reimagining how beyond the 8,000 or so subscribers, we can get that at an enterprise level now, not just at an individual level, so corporations can subscribe rather than just singular design engineers on their own. And then we've probably gone a bit further with what's on there as software. Software is probably even reimagining the business model, or at least challenging the business model. So before, where the software was still in the sort of the packaged box and you go and buy it, software is now being live with a distributed digital capability. So we implemented that now you can buy software in this digital distributed fashion. Software itself is probably just something that sits in there. We've created an enabled business proposition where you can sell any product or indeed any service now in a digital distributed fashion. The software implementation was starting thinking about it in a concept session to go live in just 90 days. And that's the speed that you have to move now to be the racing car analogy that Nicki has talked about. So we've done that together. How would we recommend at Box? How do we recommend working together with RS that others can do this in either manufacturing or many other industries? Sorry, I forgot I had the clicker. You first need a concise digital strategy. You need something that connects the business outcomes and the business aspirations to what you want to do in digital. At Box, one of the things we really look to do is not understand what you want to implement, but why you want to implement something. What's the business driver? What are you trying to achieve as an outcome? And we worked hard with Nicki and his leadership team to understand where do you want to go as RS Group as a business. And worked with Nicki on that digital strategy that he'd already devised as to how does that strategy come to life within the vision. And then there's the difficult bit. How do you bridge strategy into actual execution, the really hard bit? What would we recommend? As we've just talked about the examples, you develop small, agile work packages. delivering frequently, but focused and measuring the outcomes based on how it's influencing the digital strategy and how it's influencing the business outcomes. That's why we put the metrics on there about 8,000 suppliers or X amount of million pounds delivered in revenue, because it's about focusing on how are we moving the needle on the business moving forward, not necessarily what we're implementing. Now with digital strategies, you'll get ideas, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, and I could do all of them in short, small, agile ways. Great. But actually you probably want to do a few brilliantly and rather than a lot less in a more mediocre fashion. So you've really got to pare them down into what's prioritization in terms of probably what's going to take this amount of effort versus what's going to be the biggest benefit I can get out of it. And you'll start surfacing those up to the top of these are the things we need to do first. But all aligned to your digital strategy. You need to choose the right technology. Nicki's already talked about it. Pretty much in the ecosystem, your technology has to be edge-driven. It reports by exception rather than just chucks data at you for you to try and consume. Open architecture, we're big fans of open architecture, so probably a little bit of a personal bias there, but I'll go open architecture. And it needs to be lightweight. When you're selecting technology at the moment, particularly say you've got a manufacturing tank, something's broken, when you go out there now, rather than just looking at a specification of what functionally these things can do, these edge technologies, they'll tell you what they can do from a data perspective, and you need to understand that because the data is the power. Understand what the data architecture is, understand how it serves up the data, and most importantly, understand how you can use it, because as soon as you flick the switch, it'll start giving you great data that you can drive insights from. And you need to use a broker technology that allows you to connect all of that data in the ecosystem, but that's a whole nother session we'll run on another day. And finally, you need to use the right people. You can't keep solving the same challenges, and many people have said this, with the same people that got you there in the first place. You need to think differently. You need to grow in an ecosystem with partnerships. Obviously with digital partners such as ourselves, but as I mentioned, with BBC, supplier partnerships, etc. It's so important that there's a partnership emphasis on your ecosystem and that you change the way you approach and that you solve those problems using that independence that that partners who aren't part of your wedded business can bring. And you need to find partners that share your values. That's why we're almost wearing the same hoodies. We share values. On Wednesday, I will be sharing the same hoodies because Royal Mail have assured me that my hoodie is safely at home, having been delivered this afternoon, not in time for this session. You need to wrap all of that around adopting a partnership mindset, not just with the people you work with on a technical delivery level, as I've said, but also everybody you engage with within that ecosystem against the three things I've already described. I think we'll go on to some closing notes and Q&A.
So hopefully what you've gleaned from the session that Paul and I have discussed here before we open to some questions is really we're all part of a community, first and foremost, and we should play an active role in that community because change is about people and you're all leaders in that change. When you think about that from an organizational context, you still got me? Yeah, organizational context, it's really about how you live outside of the organization that you work as part of and going connecting with the ecosystems through that concise digital strategy, through that execution, bringing suppliers, partners, and experts together to create the new and the different, not thinking about how you supercharge the tractor, but more how you build the supercar that enables us as communities to deliver on what will be an unprecedented level of change in the next 5 years. So you have to ask yourself whether you're ready for that. And then lastly, really the real skill of all of this comes down to the execution. And the execution isn't possible if you don't choose the right partners with the right mindset that share your values and not the jumper and work together to execute flawlessly, which hopefully Paul and I have brought some examples to life on how we've done that over the last number of years and given you some food for thought on how you can move forwards on that journey. And lastly, we just want to open up to say, we want to keep sharing this knowledge. We want to help open the dialogue around where do you start? How do you take that MVP mentality? How do you iterate? How do you take a more agile approach to delivering change? It's very hard in organizational contexts. I know we've experienced it in RS, and there's been many great leaders who have iterated on that journey to get where we are today. So we're opening up a digital mastermind. If you wish to join and partake in that, we'd ask you scan the QR code. It will take you to a web page. You can fill in your details and then provide some details as a follow-up to go and connect yourself with other industry leaders, other peers that can help along that journey and start that ecosystem connectivity from today. So that's all that Paul and I want to share with you. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. And we'll open up some Q&A, hopefully.
So if anybody has any questions, could you please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Yeah, over here, Lisa. Yeah?
Don't give it to him.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
How hard is it to get the working relationship between a small organisation and a very large organisation? How have you found that?
So the question, just so everybody we've got clarity on the mic, how hard is it to work with a large organisation and connect into a small organisation? So, as I said, RS is a £3 billion FTSE 100 company. OKdo was conceived inside of that organisation 4 years ago and has grown obviously strongly since. But the most challenging dynamic, I'd say, it is quite hard when you recognise that there's a lot of cultural differences of what you're trying to achieve in a small dynamic business is a more entrepreneurial, fail fast, take risks, learn, iterate, keep building the new and the different. And that culture doesn't always sit completely congruent with a large organization who want to take more of a risk managed approach. You know, the change is more considered. The implications are more significant if you get that wrong. You know, if you take the website down in RS, that's going to cost you £8 million a day. So it's a very different entity entirely. So I say being really mindful of the stakeholders you're engaging with and help people understand that you're both sort of cogs in the same machine that can help create a catalyst for change and learning whilst we have a different risk appetite in a bigger business. And really together, I think they can work more in harmony. The caution I would provide is trying to keep them as exclusive entities and not sharing, because I don't think that allows or fosters really a collective ownership on both endeavours. So that's my personal experience on that journey.
I'd agree. Box's revenue is a shade less than RS Group's, quite a shade. I think trust is a big element, building trust between the two relationships, and that's working closely together. That's listening to each other. So we learned very early on that we need to provide some constructive challenge. So even though we were small in comparison to RS, we were able to construct, having got the expertise in the digital landscape that perhaps we didn't have in the manufacturing or distribution landscape that RS have. And you find that you work and engage with partners like Nicki who are willing to listen to that point of view, and you come to a common ground and work together. But I think that's built on trust. I think the values helps as well with all of that together. But ultimately, when you're a smaller organization, as long as you're outcome driven and you're making sure that you're delivering value, that goes a long way, and that we're interested in making the success, in this case of RS Group as a business, that everything that we do is driving that value outcome on a trust basis. And I think, Nicki, it's worked for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for your question, sir.
As a business that started just before COVID, what sort of struggles did you come up against going through that sort of lockdown process and coming out positively at the end?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll start with OKdo, and you've made some sizable changes in Box as well. But so OKdo, yes, is 4 years old. We had the fortunes, obviously, of being part of a bigger organisation with a much longer heritage, which has 10,000 employees. We have 50 in OKdo, so it's a very different dynamic. The most challenging thing actually through the pandemic, as you say, was around how do you bring people together when in an entrepreneurial organization where creativity and collaboration, the whiteboard drawing, that stimulus is really hard to recreate virtually. We're also quite a geographically dispersed team, so we have members of our team in that 50 that sit in San Francisco, in Shenzhen, in Malmo, in Sweden, in the UK, so we have quite a broad team. So in some respects, we were already having to work virtually anyway to connect that organization. But I'd say it was that dynamic had to have a high level of intentionality on what do we need to do here and what technologies will foster that creativity and collaboration. And I think that's where Box really brought that experience that they'd work with other clients in these kind of dynamics. They're working with organizations beyond Wales and Cardiff, so they had to find ways to build that creativity without the travel. And so they would provide us some great insights on, maybe use Muriel boards or these sorts of things that help stimulate that. I'd say that's probably the thing that helped us really co-create what was the business in the first instance. But really listening to the partners we had to kind of bring best practice that we didn't have by default, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we were, funnily enough, already quite enabled for the COVID, not that we realized it, because of the nature of our business. So we were already very, very heavy Zoom users. We already used Miro boards very heavily to not have the whiteboards anymore, but have them virtually. That was mainly because we didn't want to write stuff up, but we had them. And I think Agile's helped us an awful lot as well, because the whole Agile principles are about collaborating and communicating regularly. So we already had the daily standards in place and the ceremonies where the team was talking very, very regularly. So we just quite seamlessly moved that all online. And we've changed our business model since. So we were about 95% all based in an office in South Wales. We're about 60-40 now. We've changed the office, and we probably won't go back to anything other than a hybrid model. I think the one thing that we had to learn was the cultural connections outside of just transactional work conversations, if that makes sense, because they happen so naturally in the office. We had to overemphasize getting the teams together that wasn't about a stand-up or wasn't about a retro, but was more about, let's just get on a call, and we do it every Thursday still, where people talk about anything. And if anybody ever listened into that, it's all perfectly proper, but it's just banal. It goes anywhere about where do you keep your chocolate, in a fridge, not in a fridge. And it works because it just connects the organization together. So that's the bit we had to do over and above what was quite a natural thing for us anyway.
Any questions? No? Good.
Speaking of chocolate.
Oi. Just one thing
Just
to
in
add
case
on
you need
that.
an
Sorry,
energy
just on
boost.
the final thing with the QR
Yes,
code.
please.
We've put, if you are interested, please do sign up. The date and the location is TBC, because we really want to do these in short groups, face-to-face, as much as possible. So we haven't said it's definitely going to be on the third Wednesday of November or anything like that. We'll look and assess any interest that there may be, and then we'll try and tailor it accordingly, and a location and a time to a majority of users. Sorry to...
Hey, no, not at all. So last chance for questions. If there are no further questions, can we give a round of applause to Nicki and Paul for that wonderful session and great insight. Lots of takeaway there. Well, our next session here on the Premier stage is at 2:45. So please join us if you can for that. It's a discussion about small steps having a big impact, transforming SME manufacturing with technology. So we'll see you back here at 2:45. You're late. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.